Malicious Compliance, Episode 1. In this series, people share stories where they spitefully carry out the demands of their bosses or other people, knowing it will lead to bad consequences for whoever gave those orders. My boss loves calling me at 6:15 a.m. to ask whether I'd like to cover for an employee who just called in sick. He does this regularly, and at some point it really got to me. So I decided to take the initiative and called my boss myself at 3:30 a.m., asking if he needed my help. He got very angry and tried to report me to upper management. So I showed our general manager screenshots of the times he'd been calling me. The call stopped. The camera has to be on no matter what. No problem. Just ignore my breast pump. I'm a project manager and data analyst, and I run a lot of different public health projects. In particular, there's one project involving a very demanding team from a federal government department. I recently came back to work after maternity leave. I'm in the office 3 days a week, and on those days I regularly have to pump breast milk for my baby. Luckily, I have my own private office, and usually while pumping, I can just keep working, answering email, writing reports, and so on. I have a nice compact breast pump, but it's still noticeable. It sticks out from my shirt and makes a soft noise. The other day we had a Zoom call scheduled at exactly one of those moments when I needed to pump. Instead of skipping the meeting, I just decided to turn off my camera so I could turn on the pump and still take part and listen to everyone. Heck, I was even in my own office, not working from home. I felt like an extremely conscientious employee. The meeting started, and several people immediately turned off their cameras. The lead manager made an announcement. I want to remind everyone that all cameras must be on, because this isn't a virtual meeting. It's a simulation of an in-person meeting, whatever that means. I quickly sent him a private message explaining everything, but got no reply. Instead, he said again, I repeat, I'm waiting for all participants to turn on their cameras. No problem. I turn on my camera in a video conference with 20 participants. The camera isn't pointed at my chest, but the top of my breast pump is clearly visible in the frame. And I also turned on the sound so everyone could hear my milk being pumped. I said, thanks everyone for waiting. I was just adjusting my breast pump. The meeting continued in an awkward atmosphere. A little later, several managers messaged me that you can, in fact, turn off your camera privately. But by that point, there was no reason to turn it off. In one of the most recent video conferences, the announcement was, please turn on your cameras if you're comfortable doing so right now. The neighbors wanted to hire a surveyor to determine the boundary of our properties. My parents agreed. This was a long time ago. We'd moved to an area where the houses stood too close together. We didn't like that the neighbors could see into our kitchen, so we decided to plant a bunch of shrubs on our lot. They cost us several thousand, but my parents figured it was worth it. A week later, one morning, we saw that all the plants had been completely cut down. My furious father went to confront the neighbor. The neighbor said our plants were on the boundary of his property, so he had every right to cut them down. He warned my dad that if anything like this happened on his property again, he'd immediately report us to the authorities. Later that same day, my father called the company that had planted the shrubs and found out that, under warranty, we could have them replanted for free the following week. The new plants we most definitely planted on our own property. However, a few days later, we caught the neighbor uprooting them at 2 a.m. We called the police for trespassing, and after talking with the neighbor, he decided to hire a surveyor to mark the property line. My father agreed. A few days later, I came home and saw orange tape in the neighbor's yard. It turned out his fence extended 3.5 meters over our property line. In the end, we all watched the enraged neighbor tear down his fence over the next month. We enjoyed the new space and the privacy on our lot, while the neighbor ended up losing a quarter of his backyard. On top of that, he had to pay almost $10,000 for destroying our property. And we got to plant our shrubs again. You can't work from home anymore because you're offline too often. When bringing employees back to the office after the pandemic, my company did a big reshuffle of who could work from home permanently, who could split time between the office and home, and so on. I really wanted to work from home full-time. I hate the office with all my heart. I get distracted there. It takes forever to get to, and there's no benefit to the actual work. In short, I just like working from home. In May, when we assumed the whole team would be coming back, the company started handing out new assignments. I was told I needed to spend a full workday in the office, which made no sense to me. I work on a team of 8, and each of us is assigned to a different office, all scattered across the country. In 3 years at this company, I've literally never once been to an in-person meeting, and I never needed to see anyone in person. Everyone else on my team got to work remotely. I brought it up with my boss and asked him to let me work from home too. When I started at this company, I lived somewhere else, and back then, they let me work from home for 4 months before I moved. During the pandemic, I also worked from home for a year and 2 months. So of my 36 months at the company, I spent 18 working from home. In the end, my boss told me I'm offline in the chat too often, so he couldn't let me work remotely. Now, here's the thing. Our company has an instant messaging system that shows whether you're online, offline, or in a video conference. If you don't touch your keyboard for 5 minutes, you show up as offline. The company decided to treat this as an indicator of who isn't working and who's busy. The point is that, like a lot of people in a lot of jobs, I don't have enough to do for a full 8 hours every day. The workload I get in a normal day takes 3 to 5 hours of actual focused work. I just have nothing to do the rest of the time. When I started working from home, my productivity metrics went up significantly. By every objective KPI, I'm more productive at home. There's no work I neglect or put off. When a new task comes up, I just do it until it's finished, or until I reach a point where I have to wait for someone else to do their part. Just because I have other ways to spend my free time instead of mindlessly opening the chat and pretending to be busy, management thinks I'm doing a bad job because I'm offline. I was told that if it weren't for that, they'd let me work from home. So in the end, I wrote a 6-line PowerShell script that virtually presses the period key every 4 minutes. It starts every day at 8 a.m. and stops at 5 p.m. So now I'm literally always online. I do the same amount of work as before, still read books, watch TV, and play video games. But all day, a bright green light shines next to my name. Because of the worsening COVID situation, our return to the office got pushed back a bit. After that, I met with my boss, and he said they'd noticed I've been offline much less lately, so they reconsidered their decision. And now I can work from home. And it's all because of a tiny freaking icon in some program. And that's where I'll end my story about why lower and middle-level managers are the dumbest and most useless workers at any American company. My manager made me go get a doctor's note, even though it's illegal, so the doctor decided to teach him a lesson and wrote me 2 weeks of sick leave instead of 2 days. I was about 20 at the time and worked at a supermarket. I should mention that I was a pretty hardworking and reliable employee. I was never late, often came in early, and rarely took sick days. One day I got very sick. I didn't sleep all night. I was violently sick from both ends. Around 2 a.m., I was sitting on the toilet with my head down in the sink, completely wrecked. I must have passed out at some point because the next thing I knew, when I lifted my head off the sink, it was already 7 a.m. That day I was supposed to start work at 1200, but obviously that didn't happen. I called my manager, let's call him Steve. He was a real jerk. The guy never believed anyone who called in sick, except his friends, usually other managers, not lower-level staff, even though he often took sick days himself, mostly from hangovers rather than illness. Our conversation went like this. Me. Hi, Steve. Sorry. I can't come in today. I'm sick. Steve. With what? Me. I don't know. Maybe the flu. I didn't sleep all night. I've been throwing up and I have a fever. Steve. Don't give me that. If you had the flu, you'd be completely out of it. I need you here. Come in or you're fired. Me. I can't. I just told you I won't stop throwing up and I keep passing out. Steve. Either come to work or bring a doctor's note, or you're fired. In the UK, by law, you can call in sick and recover at home for 5 days without providing a doctor's note. That is, you can just tell your employer you're sick and you don't need any note. If you're sick for more than 5 days, then you do need one. Demanding a doctor's note from an employee within those 5 days is illegal. I knew this, but I was very scared. This was during the economic crisis, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. So I got dressed and, barely able to stand, dragged myself to the doctor, a 25-minute walk away. There I sat in the waiting room for a little over an hour. Finally, I went into her office, and she was furious that I'd even come in. I explained the whole situation with Steve, how he'd threatened to fire me, and so on. And then my doctor turned her anger on my manager. She asked whether the company pays us for sick leave. I said yes. He needs a note, she said. Fine, I'll give him a note. My manager just needed a note confirming I was sick, but instead my doctor wrote something like this. My name came to the clinic because, manager's name, insisted she see a doctor, even though this is illegal. All employees are allowed to notify their supervisor of their condition themselves and take time off. Because my patient in this condition was forced to make this unnecessary and extremely dangerous trip to the clinic, with a temperature of 39 degrees Celsius, nearly passing out in the waiting room, I am signing my name off work for 2 full weeks. If my name had been allowed, as the law requires, to simply notify her employer of her condition, she would have needed only a few days. But because of the strain, she now requires 2 full weeks. She is not permitted to return to work until date 2 weeks out. The doctor said she would have signed me off for even longer, but that was the longest she could write without requiring additional proof. Basically, instead of just letting me off for a couple of days, I was now given 2 full weeks of paid sick leave. I went to Steve's office and handed him the note. He looked worried and tried to make excuses. I wasn't seriously going to fire you. Well, I don't know. When you snarled those words at me over the phone, that's exactly how it sounded. After that, the duty manager drove me home, made sure I was okay, and went back to work, where he reported what had happened to our union rep. Steve faced a disciplinary hearing where he was given a formal warning and reprimand. And me, a few days later, I felt better and enjoyed my fully paid 2 weeks off. Thanks so much for watching. In the comments under the video, tell me how you like this series and share your own malicious compliance stories. And don't forget to check out our other videos. Big hug.